Hello, gentle viewers. This is Abendian, welcoming you back to Tabletop Simulator, where today we're going to be beginning our playthrough of War of the Ring 2nd Edition. War of the Ring 2nd Edition was produced by Ares Games and developed by, and I apologize if we get any of these gentlemen's names incorrectly, Roberto Di Maglio, Marco Maggi, and Francesco Nepitello. This is an asymmetrical war game for 2 to 4 players, but a tiny bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Commentary on my part. I really don't think this game works very well at player counts above 2, which is great for me and my wife because that's usually who I play games with. But it's not something that, if you're looking for a multiplayer war game, I don't know that War of the Ring is going to scratch that itch for you. It very clearly seems to me like making War of the Ring 2 to 4 players is just a way to let people who have bigger gaming groups know that they can play the game, which is totally fine, but I can't imagine wanting to ever play this game at more than 2 people. That's just me, though. I wanted to show that the mod does include all of the expansion content. I don't have any of the expansions, so we're just going to go a boop and a boop. And then we're going to talk about the game, and then we'll play the first couple of rounds, probably, and then we'll save the rest for another week. Gotta shuffle decks. Shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. And shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. War of the Ring is what I consider, and this is purely Avi nomenclature, feel free to ignore if you don't care, is what I call a Tier 2 war game. A Tier 1 war game is something that's very, very simple, very, very accessible, and is probably at least somewhat dice-driven. So the classic example of a Tier 1 in my mind is Risk. This can also include games that are just have much simpler mechanics, like a game like Blitzkrieg, which you saw a couple weeks ago. And I would also argue a game like Shores of Tripoli, although Shores of Tripoli really straddles that line beautifully between 1 and 2 in the 3-tier system in my head. So if someone has already played a game like Risk or Blitzkrieg or something similar, and they want to try something a bit tougher, I would throw Shores of Tripoli at them. Well, Shores of Tripoli is also pretty damn great as a Tier 1 with just a little bit more complexity than, say, a Risk or a Blitzkrieg. Conversely, a Tier 2 game is one where there may still be dice to help resolve battles, or there may just be cards, but it's something where you have more information and it's a little bit easier to tell who's going to win a battle. You don't get ridiculous situations like you do in Risk, where you have, say, 3 armies against 27 armies, and you win because you just keep rolling better than they do. Which is one of the things I hate about Risk. It's one of the reasons why I will never play Standard Risk again. I'll only play some of the Risk variants because the base game of Risk is just too frustrating for me right now. Maybe someday that'll change, but honestly, probably not. So Tier 2 games are more complex. They rely a little bit less on randomness to determine who wins different battles. And there's some other gimmick that makes it different from other war games of the same type. And the classic example to me of a Tier 2 war game would be something like Hannibal, Rome versus Carthage. Or Twilight Struggle, although you can argue Twilight Struggle is not actually a war game. It's the same kind of thing, where there's randomness, but it's not, say, every battle turns into Thermopylae, but with the Spartans winning each time. And War of the Ring is definitely squarely a Tier 2 war game. A Tier 3 war game is a game that goes out of its way to try to simulate some of the natural complexities of the battlefield. This includes things like a detailed terrain system. It includes specific movement rules about where you can and can't move. And most importantly, it has to include logistics. There has to be some way to simulate the effects of reduced supply. And so we have Paths of Glory and Washington's War. Washington's War is more of a Tier 2, actually, because the supply is somewhat simplistic, but I would say Washington's War sits on the border between the two, tier 2 and tier 3. For the people, definitely a tier 3, a hard tier 3. Um, and that's just kind of how I organize war games in my head and in my collection. And I know that if I get someone to play and enjoy a particular game, that I can either keep them in that tier or we can try like kind of a gateway into a new tier. Um, Washington's War is one of my favorite board games that currently doesn't have a tabletop simulator. What's the word I'm looking for? Mod. But the moment they have one, I'm gonna do a run through of it because it's one of my favorite mid tier 2, maybe even in the low 3 territory. Um, but it still plays very, very quickly and very, very smartly. War of the Rings Second Edition is definitely in tier 2 in my opinion. I'm not saying that any of these tiers are good or bad. There's going to be days where maybe like my wife and I are going to play 3 board games in a row. I'm going to want a game like Blitzkrieg because it plays so quickly. I'm not going to pull out For the People because we'll be so tired after we play it that we won't want to play anything else. So, that's just how life works sometimes. So let's talk about this particular game now that I've gotten all the meta stuff out of the way. This is a board game for 2 to 4 players in which one player or team takes on the side of the Free Peoples and one player or team takes the side of the Shadow. The game starts somewhere about a third into the first book of the trilogy, Fellowship of the Ring, which is where the Fellowship is actually declared, and we have the 9 companions, all of whom are in Rivendell, hanging out with Elrond. Hi, Elrond. You're not actually in this game. I think he is in one of the expansions, though. Which is fine, because Elrond's kind of a dick. He was never my favorite character to begin with. And the two sides are going to first be playing a war game. This is a war game. Very clearly, it's the first word in the bloody title, war. But it's also got this additional angle to it, which is the ring. So while the war game parts are somewhat traditional, there's some dice checking to determine who wins the battles, but you have cards that can affect it, and different things can affect your dice rolls. There's also this hidden movement portion where the ring bearers are going to basically plan their journey. Once they get to a certain point, they decide to actually move, and we're trying to get the ring bearers all the way here to the Crack of Doom. And the game can end in one of 4 ways. And these player aids, by the way, are fantastic. I think they might be part of the actual board game. I haven't looked in a while, but if they're not, I would almost certainly print these out because they're awesome. Please note, very importantly, that these 4 victory conditions are ranked. What that means is, if 2 things happen at the same time, you would look at who actually got the lower ranked condition. So the 4 conditions are, the corruption marker gets all the way up to 12. Thematically, what happens is the ring bearers are seduced by the ring's power. They give themselves over to the shadow, and Sauron reclaims the One Ring. And lots of probably horrible things happen for lots of people. And sadness goes throughout the land. The flip side of this is the Fellowship, represented by the Ring Bearer's token, makes it all the way to the Crack of Doom, in which case they chuck the ring into the fires of Mount Doom, and the Free People are saved, and everyone is happy, and they probably eat lots of food and sing lots of songs. It is Tolkien, after all. The third possibility is victory on the battlefield for the Shadow. Now, the Shadow player needs 10 victory points in order to win the game, and that is done by capturing either cities or strongholds, For example, Pelargir here is a city, and it's worth 1 victory point. Minas Tirith, on the other hand, is a stronghold, and it's worth 2 victory points. You'll also see some other things here called, I can't remember if they're called towns or settlements, maybe both. Oh no, everything is a settlement, but these are towns, like in Fulda and Westonmet and Lamedin. Or probably Lamedin, but I always call it Lamedin. What a lame place to live. These are just places where you can raise reinforcements. Other than that, they have no victory point value, other than if you take them as the shadow, they can't get reinforcements there, and that's pretty good stuff for you. The final way that the game can end is if the Free Peoples take 4 Shadow Strongholds worth of points, which is a much... You're probably thinking, oh, 4 is less than 10. Yeah, but it's much easier to get to the Free Peoples, and they have to spread to cover a lot more ground. So the strongholds for the Shadow, 3 of them are actually in Mordor. Pretty much, you cannot get to Barad-dûr, I don't think. No, because it could take an army into Gogoroth. I mean, if they get that far, they've already won the game anyway. But there's also Dol Guldur here. There's Moria, Mount Gundabad, and then if you get in Saruman, you have Orthanc. And then there's also Farharad and Umbar for the Southrons and Easterlings. So even though it's only 4 points for the Free Peoples, taking their own back doesn't count. It has to be something that was shadow controlled at the start of the game. And the Shadow's going to have more people than the Free Peoples. Before I actually dive into playing the game, I need to explain a fundamental fact of how the game works. And it's incredibly important. Whenever a Free People's nation loses a unit, the unit is gone forever. The Shadow player, on the other hand, has an effectively limitless supply, with the exception of their 3 leaders. Leaders can be they're called minions, can be removed from the game permanently. I think there's also a couple cards that like to remove Nazgul from the game permanently, which are the Shadow leaders. But for the most part, they have an effectively unlimited army, where they can just bring in reinforcements, and if they lose a unit, oh wow, there's 10 more where that came from. The Free Peoples don't have that luxury. They have to think very carefully about when they're ready to sacrifice a unit, because they'll never get that unit back. There are 3 main categories of units in the game. Regulars, like our Man of Rohan there. Elites, like Horsey Boy here in Edoras. And leaders, like this wonderful person here. Maybe it's like Aomer or something. Because Aomer's also not in the game. Sorry, Aomer. Regulars and elites are basically the same, but it takes 2 hits to kill an elite instead of 1. Leaders allow for special rerolls. There's also a special category of leaders, which are called companions for the Free Peoples and minions for the Shadow. And we'll get into them a little bit later. They have some extra powers that make them very useful to have. So what happens each round is quite simple. First, we each draw an event card from each of our decks, and we always have 2 decks. When a deck is empty, it's empty. You don't shuffle discards back in, so when you discard a card, it's gone forever. Then the Fellowship gets to do a specific action. They can declare and or change the guide of the Fellowship. And when they get to Mordor, then they can get on the Mordor track. Next, we have the Hunt allocation. For the first turn of the game, the Shadow doesn't have to do this, but normally, if the Free Peoples try to move the ring last turn, the Shadow knows that's going to happen, and they're going to have to go ahead and allocate some resources to it. One moment. That's better. Next we have the free people and the shadow people. Each get to roll their dice. Note a very important, what's the word I'm looking for? Advantage that the shadow player has. Even under ideal circumstances, they will always have more dice than the free people's player. Because the shadow has more to do with the dice. And that's very important. And it's something that the free peoples have to learn how to manage. They have to make the most out of each die, rather than anything else. Once everyone has rolled the dice, then we take the heat of the meat, the main part of the game. Free people uses a die, then the shadow, then the free, then the shadow, then the free, then the shadow. Note you can always choose to pass, so that you can make the shadow player take another turn. It's highly unlikely that the free people would ever have more dice in the shadow. Like, it could happen, but it would be pretty rare. And then we check at the end of the turn to see if there have been any victory conditions. I'm going to quickly check my hard copy of the manual. I just don't remember if they start the game with any cards. But I don't think they do. I think you just get the 2 that you draw in the first turn. Setting up the game. They do not get any cards to start the game. Okay. That's what I needed to make sure of. Perfect. Also, kudos to the mod maker, both for including both the expansions and these lovely, helpful brown houses. These make it really clear what's impassable and what isn't, which isn't actually that clear on the board itself. It's easy to make mistakes, and you can go, like, for example, from Lamden to Fulda, when in reality you can't. Because there's mountains in the way. Alright. Now there's one last thing I have to do as part of setup. And this is just because I find it annoying. You certainly don't have to do this. I'm going to remove the hands of the purple player and the orange player. Because we're not actually playing with 4 players, we're just playing with 2. So the first step of every turn is we shuffle up. We won't do this at the beginning, but we draw 1 card from each deck. And let's talk about the anatomy of a card. Excuse me. Every card in the game can be played in one of 2 ways. As a event on the top part, or as a combat card, the bottom part. Cards do have specific requirements to play them. Every card in the game can be played with a Palantir symbol on your dice. There aren't any here to start the game. I'm sure there is one for the shadow right here. Or the other symbol in the top right. In this case, it's a character die. So you can play these with a character or an army muster. And we can see... Please note there is a difference for the shadow player. The shadow player can't play an event with an army muster card. I don't think. No, I think they can, actually. I don't know why the card art is different. Like, here it lists both an army and a muster. Or maybe that's just meant to be an army. I think it's just meant to be an army. I'm confusing myself. Anyway, so any event can be played either with an event die, or the character dice, or the army dice. Pretty straightforward, right? In addition, you can also play the bottom half of the card during combat, and you don't need any special dice to do that. Each player gets to play 1 card per round of combat. Most cards have some sort of prerequisite. Like, for example, through a day and a night, we have to have a Free People's Army that has a companion as a leader. And there are no companions on the board in the beginning of the game. So that's something that we're going to have to deal with if we want to use that card to its fullest potential. Let's go ahead and switch to the shadow player. Shuffle, 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 and they again get 1 of each. There's a hard limit of 6 cards per hand, and the moment you gain a 6th card, a 7th or 8th or 9th or however many cards, you discard the extra cards. And remember, when a card's discarded, it's basically gone forever. Unless another card lets you snoop in the discard pile, which some of them do, I think. So phase 1 is done. Next, we have declaring the fellowship. Right now, there's no point. They would get no benefit from doing it, so they're just not going to do it. But they could change the guide. And let's talk about why it's almost always a good reason to think about changing the guide. First of all, every guide, every companion has a level. Boop, boop. There are 2 3s, 2 2s, and 2 1s. I know there's actually 9 companions in the book. No, sorry, there's 3 2s. Yeah, there's 2 3s, 3 2s, 2 1s. Sam and Frodo are basically considered to be the ring bearers, and therefore they're not companions too. They're just actually the ones moving the ring around. You can see them here. Hi, Sam and Frodo. Also, there's a Bill the Pony miniature here. I don't know what that's for, but I love that Bill finally gets the recognition he's always deserved, which is pretty exciting. So a level is both how far they can move and how good they are at protecting the Fellowship from corruption. We'll talk about that more when we have our first hunt for the ring. As the guide, they can do their guide action. And both of these are pretty strong guide actions, actually. So first, it's much easier to hide the Fellowship if Strider is your guide, or Gandalf lets you draw an event immediately after you play an event. I'm going to go ahead and make Strider the guide, because I think his guide ability is more useful. Eventually, we're going to want to get Strider and Gandalf out of the Fellowship so that we can then use their abilities and make them their best selves, basically. So let's talk for a moment about companions and minions and what makes them so special. There are 5 characters in the game, 2 for the Free Peoples, 3 for the Shadow, that basically act as superpowered leaders. Technically, okay. It's actually 7 companions, but only 2 of them are superpowered. They basically just count as leaders with a specific ability. But Strider can become Aragorn, and Gandalf can become Gandalf the White. So let's talk about the 2 differences between here. If Strider ever goes to Minas Tirith, Dol Amroth, or Pelargir, and it's unconquered, I can use the Will of the West action die and change Strider into Aragorn, where he's much more powerful. He adds combat strength, he adds a die to their dice pool, very important, and he actually counts as 2 leaders instead of just 1. On the flip side, if Gandalf ever dies, he's the only companion that can do this, by the way. If he ever dies, and there's already a minion in play for the Shadow, then you can bring in Gandalf the White, which is pretty sweet. And Gandalf is really good at moving, and he can also counter enemy leadership, which can be very, very useful indeed. On the flip side, we have the 3 Shadow minions. We have the Witch King, Saruman, and the Mouth of Sauron. So the Witch King is basically a superpowered Nazgul. He's basically the counter to Aragorn, essentially. But when he comes into play, all Free People's Nations do get activated. So that's an important thing to consider before you play the Witch King. Also, he's really good at helping you draw more cards if you want to. Then we have Saruman. Saruman can't move. Notice his level is actually 0. However, he's really good at mustering more units for Isengard. He makes elites more powerful. And he's just a really helpful counter to Gandalf, even if he can't move. And then last but certainly not least, we have the Mouth of Sauron, who is another really powerful leader for them, which is quite good. And all of these extra people here the superstars of the game give you extra dice. And that is incredibly powerful. And it's so important that it's going to be something that dictates your strategy in the early parts of the game. You want to get these people out of the game, out onto the board as soon as possible. So, we've actually only completed the first 2 phases, but it's going to get easier. The shadow player can decide if they want to allocate anything to the hunt for the ring. The answer, your first turn, is almost always going to be no. But that may change, of course. So now the free people roll their dice. And they have 4 dice to start the game. I'll explain what each die does when they come up. Not a bad roll. And then the shadow player rolls their dice. If I get any eyes, they immediately go into the hunt box. And I can't use those dice as actions. So this one right here, I immediately move this over to the hunt box. I can't use that die to move armies or whatever. So, now the actual game begins. And what's going to happen is, at any point, the Free People's player can actually pass and have the Shadow player go again. There's reasons you might want to do that. For instance, if what's going to happen depends on what the Shadow player is going to do. But there's a couple of important things we still need to talk about now that we have these particular dice. And first I need to talk about the politics track. This involves when the different nations in the game get involved in the war. At the start of the game, no one is involved at war. You can move into neutral territory, which doesn't belong to another nation, but you can't cross borders, and you can't use a muster action to gain reinforcements. So, for instance, until Sauron is at war, I could move this army to South Ithilien because it's neutral territory. There's no colored border around it, or even to Osgiliath. But I couldn't go directly into Minas Tirith because that's considered part of Gondor, and I'm not at war yet. For the Free People's nations, a nation has to be activated in order for it to make the final jump from the level 3 into at war. The Shadow Nations are always active. They can never be deactivated. So that's one of the most important things he's a muster die for, is to advance a nation on the political track. You can move any nation you want to down the political track, but you can't cross and do at war until they're active. And there's some events, actions in-game that'll actually cause people to become activated, for instance. So that's one of the things you can do with a muster die. An army die allows you to move 2 armies, or attack with 1 army, or play a card from the strategy event deck, because those have the army symbol on them. And here's a helpful guide to remind you what they can do. Oh, there are muster event cards, aren't they? There's actually 2 different kinds. There's army and muster cards. I was wrong earlier. Sorry. Lastly, we have character dice, which are very, very important for the Free People's player. A little bit less so for the Shadow player. First of all, a character die can be used to move any army with a leader, companion, or minion, like the army die does. And you can also make an attack with that. You can also use it to play a character event out of your hand. But for the Free Peoples, it's critical. And you want character dice as much as you can get them. It's the only way you can move the ring. And it's the only way you can hide the ring. If it gets revealed. I like how there was thunder outside right when I said, if the ring gets revealed. Very apropos nature. Thank you for the sound effects. I don't know if you could hear that or not. Probably not. But if you did, there's a bit of thunder. So the character dice are really important for the Fellowship. And without them, you can't really move the ring bearers. And the game is deliberately designed so that a military victory for the Free Peoples is possible. But basically only if things go very badly wrong for the Shadow, essentially. Okay, so the Free Peoples get to go first, and they've got a very easy choice to make. It's never going to get any easier. they're going to move the hunt for the ring. They're going to move up here. I'm checking a thing here really quickly. Okay, so it goes in the hunt box after the hunt begins. So, what we do is we just take the ring token and move it to 1. This means that when I actually move the ring bearers, they can move 1 region. Pretty simple. Ring bearers can go anywhere they want to, but if they ever go through a shadow-controlled stronghold, a hunt immediately succeeds. So they generally want to avoid them if they can at all possible. So, the next thing that happens is the hunt for the ring happens. Now, there's 1 die in the hunt box. If there were 0 dice in the hunt box, then nothing would happen. Because you only roll based on the number of dice for the hunt. But, you know, it happened. And so, we are going to roll a single die. If we get a 6, the hunt is successful. If we don't, it's not. So we're going to go roll. And we get a 6. So we now pull a tile out of the hunt pool. And something happens to the fellowship. Okay. This is 1 damage, and they've got a couple ways they can deal with it. First, they could sacrifice a companion. It either must be the guide or a random companion, though. If you sacrifice a companion, they absorb hunt damage equal to their level. We don't really want to do that this early in the game, though. So the other way to deal with damage is to basically use the ring to disappear, and that's going to increase their corruption. So they haven't been revealed yet. However, they have taken their first corruption damage of the game. Tiles do not go back in the bag unless either the pool is empty or you get to Mordor. And there's also these super powerful special tiles which can get added due to different cards. The last thing we do is we add this to the hunt box now, and the hunt becomes a lot more dangerous. Because this now adds a +1 to every hunt roll for the rest of this round. So, very dangerous. Is moving the ring, but you have to do it or you basically can't win the game as a Free People's player. We have this lovely thing here to count rounds, and actually I'm going to leave it on here because it's actually a helpful reminder for me. Okay, what are the Shadow players going to do? Well, let's actually look at their cards, because I haven't looked at their cards yet. There may be the perfect event here right now. Oh, now, that's very intriguing. Now, of course, I can't... Nazgul can move infinite spaces, but because the Shadow's not at war, I can't put them in Rivendell, for instance. And I can never put them by themselves. Leaders can't go by themselves into a space with another army. They just kind of get it. They just kind of ignore each other. So I can't really do that one. I don't have an Elven Stronghold, so I can't play either of these cards. I don't meet the prerequisites. I mean, I do meet the prerequisite for Nazgul Search, but it's kind of a waste of a card. I'd rather keep it and use it later when it's more advantageous. I would really like to get Isengard at war, so that I can get Saruman in nice and early. So I'm going to go ahead and use a muster die. I'm going to take him out of the box as a reminder that I've actually done the action. And we're going to move Isengard to war. So now Isengard could attack Rohan anytime they see fit. And next turn I can use a muster die to bring Saruman into the game. Now, with Saruman entering the game very soon, I don't have a Will of the West, so I don't feel a particular need to force this. But anytime a minion is in play, I can either separate Gandalf out. Actually, it makes sense to kind of do that now, doesn't it? I could also get the Elves some pretty valuable leadership. Or heck, even use a companion to activate activate, like, for instance, the dwarves or whatever. And I believe campaigns activating nations happens only during the Declare the Fellowship stage. Doesn't it? Oh no, you don't want to be under politics. Companions. Come on, politics. Here we go. But a companion who can activate them ends its moves in a city or stronghold. That's what I thought. Okay. The elves who start the game is activated, so I could use Gandalf to try to activate the dwarves, for instance, or the north. That could actually be pretty tempting. So I'm going to go ahead and not use the character die as I wanted to. I'm going to use to separate Gandalf from the Fellowship. Which I can do this because there's an equally leveled companion to be the new guide. I could also separate out a hobbit. And I kind of actually like that idea now that I think about it. You can separate as many companions as you want to. Plus it's thematic, right? We get Pippin out with Gandalf. Yeah, I like that a lot, actually. Plus it gives us another leader. So I'm going to put these cards over here, and this just indicates that they're out on the board, and then we put the Gandalf and Pippin tokens. Pippin, Gandalf. So they start with the Fellowship. That's where they're placed onto the board. So in this case, in Rivendell. However, they get to move. Because of Gandalf's special ability... Oh, he's not Gandalf the White. He doesn't get to use Shadowfax. So he gets to move 3 spaces. That's fine. He gets to move 3 spaces, plus, as far as the ring bearers are moved, which is 1. So they're going to move 4 spaces, and we're going to try to go 1, 2, 3, 4. And Pippin comes along with him, with an eye to going over and activating the north so we can get their units into the war a little bit sooner. Now, if they got attacked by the shadow player right now, they'd actually be in a lot of trouble. But I don't think you can legally attack a space that only has leaders on it. I think that's how that goes. Yeah, I don't think you can attack... Because I think armies attack armies, and it's not technically an army unless there's a unit. So yeah, you can't just attack a random leader, because otherwise they just die instantly, and it would be a pretty boring way to lose Gandalf or Pippin. Where's Pippin? Fool of a took. Okay. How do you get that out of my system? Alright. Shadow players time. What do they want to do? I wish I'd had an army die. I don't have any. Which means it's going to be harder for me to move armies, but whatever. Now remember, elites count as leaders. Oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to use a mustard die to bring in a Saruman. So Saruman is placed in Orthanc. He can never move. And then his die actually goes here. So I can't use it until the next round. But still, I have Saruman now, and that's pretty sweet. Now, back to the Free People's player. They have a secret weapon, at least with one minor exception, which are the 3 elven rings. Vilya, Nenya, and Narya. These rings allow them, once per game, to change any die to any other face they want, except a Will of the West. And that's really the only reason that they would do it now. Because they would want a Will of the West result so they could bring in Gandalf the White. But they can't do that. Because the Elven Rings don't work that way. Once you use an Elven Ring, though, they become corrupted and the Shadow player claims them. So it's important to think very carefully about when you're going to do that. With a couple of army muster dice, it would make sense for them to start trying to build up something to resist the Shadow. More effectively. And if we do expect that they're going to make it to the north or help activate the dwarves at some point, we might want to start moving them into neutral territory. But I'm going to go ahead and use an army muster die. Actually, mustering just makes more sense. And we're going to move the elves down the political track. Try to get them into the war as quickly as possible. Because they have the biggest army that's not easily engaged by the Shadow. Shadow player's turn. I'm not going to bother changing colors for the most part unless I need to look at my cards for whatever reason. I'm going to get rid of the card the die I don't have a use for. I can't play either of my events, right? I mean, I could play the Nazgul one, but it would be stupid. So I'm going to use this card to draw another deck card for either deck. And we're going to draw another character event card. Oh, no, that's a lovely card. That's definitely what we're doing next turn. They could just muster and move the elves one step closer to war. That's not a terrible use of this last die. I mean, they could just pass, but there's not really a benefit to it. So I'm just going to go ahead, and they're going to muster, and they're going to move the elves one step closer to war. I'm going to immediately use this character die, and I'm going to play the Palantir of Orthanc. And this basically says that anytime I use an event die, I get to draw another card from either deck. It basically makes him equivalent of Gandalf. Which makes Saruman even more useful to the Shadow. The free people have no dice left, so they just kind of twiddle their thumbs while I take my remaining 2 turns as the Shadow player. We're going to go ahead and muster Sauron and get him at war. And with our character dice, we're going to move one army with a leader in it. And we're going to move this army from Minas Morgul to South Ithilien. And we have now completed our first round. No one's won the game yet. So we're going to go boop. We now begin round 2. So, we begin every round the exact same way. We draw a card from each deck. And I'll look at these cards more when it comes to the specific turns of the individuals. No one has 6 or more, so I don't have to retire anything. I'm going to declare the Fellowship not to move them, but to just burn off the corruption that we took. As long as we're in a friendly controlled stronghold, we can basically reduce our corruption. There's no reason not to do it, but I'm not going to move. I want to wait till we get a few more regions under our belt so we can move in big jumps and not little tiny moves. Alright. Strider's still the guide. At some point, we're probably going to want to separate Strider from the Fellowship, but I think we'll wait until they have moved, until the Fellowship's moved a bit farther. Hunt allocation. Because they did move once, they have to keep a die in the hunt box. At least one. So I'm just going to leave the one that's already there, and then we all roll our extra dice, with the Shadow player having gained an extra die from Saruman being placed into play. So the Shadow player actually has 8 dice, and the Shadow player, or Free People player, only has 4. They always roll first. They got the die they needed. Oh dear, this is a very risky turn to move the ring. Because there's 4 dice in the hunt box. But on the flip side, they don't actually have any. They don't actually have any character dice, so they couldn't do it anyway. They could use a Will of the West die to change any other face, but that would be stupid when Gandalf the White is right here. So remember, he's left the Fellowship. I use a Will of the West result, and Gandalf the White comes into play. So the Gandalf the Grey card goes away. And Gandalf the Grey replaces the Gandalf the White token. Now he can move a lot faster because of Shadowfax. So that was a very good move for them, and that'll pay dividends in the long run. Okay. Now, before I decide I'm going to attack, I want to attack with overwhelming odds because I'm the Shadow. So I'm going to go ahead and play an Army Muster die. And we're going to use the Army portion of the action. Oh, wait a minute. That's a very nice card, actually. That's a very nice card. But there's no reason to rush those. I can play that card anytime I want to, and I want to use this card instead. It would take an... That's a muster event, right? Yeah, it's a muster event. So that's fine. I'm going to use this to move 2 armies. Or attack with 1, but I'm really just going to move 2. I'm going to move you to, what is that? Daggerlad. And I'm going to move you to the south Anduin Vale. Because I can see that the Free Peoples are wanting to get the Elves involved in the war, and I would like to be in a position to attack Lorien if that happens. So that is that die. Now, bringing the Elves into the war would be quite helpful. There's no denying that. However, I think we need to start getting people in position to absorb a potential shadow attack. So I'm going to play a muster army die to use the army portion of the die, and we're going to move armies. So we're going to move the armies from Dol Amroth to Lambden. I don't want to leave Pelargir uncovered. Otherwise, I'd strongly think about that. Yeah, I'm going to move a leader, an elite, and 1 regular into Osgiliath. I don't want this to... I want this to be somewhat bloody if I'm the Free People's player. Because I have Minas Tirith I can retreat to and do that if I need to. So that's that. That has been accomplished. It is now the Shadow player's turn. And he's going to play a muster die to play a new Power is Rising. I get 2 regulars in North and South Dunland. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. And then in Orthanc, I get 2 regulars or 2 elites. And I definitely want 2 elites. This now gives me a fairly formidable force to attack Rohan if I so desire. Might want to build up our strength a bit more, but that's definitely a thing that's happening. Another army muster die. Do they have any good reinforcement cards? Elves are not at war yet. That's very helpful, but not right at this moment. I don't have my people in an army yet. So I'm going to play an army muster die. I'm not going to play any of these cards, even though some of them are quite good. but we're going to start moving units. I'm going to move these units in the Woodland Realm one space to Western Mirkwood. Mirkwood is not considered, it's considered neutral territory. It doesn't belong to any nation, so they can move there. And we're going to get really cheeky here. We're going to go ahead and pull these 2 units into Northern Rovanian. If the North enters the war, they could sweep in through Southern Mirkwood and attack Dol Guldur. And that could be a very dangerous way for that could be a bad thing for the Shadow. So we're going to play an army muster die. And again, we're going to do it to move armies. And do we attack? Or do we defend? Or do we move more reinforcements in? I think we're going to move a bit more. We're going to set up an attack for next round. We're going to move to North Athelion. And then these units are utterly useless until they get moved out of this region. So we're going to move you to Gorgoroth. We now have a muster die. I really want to get the North at war now. So we're going to take the nations of the North. We're going to move them down a track. I don't want to put the Elves at war yet, but I definitely am strongly considering it in the very near future. And with that, we conclude another... Just kidding. We have one more thing to do here. I forgot that there's still one more die that the Saruman or the Shadow player hadn't used yet. I don't control an Elven Stronghold, and I don't have any character dice. I'm going to use this to muster. I like to get the Southrons and the Easterlings involved, actually. Because then I can use them to pressure, like, Erebor. And it just gives me another angle of attack. But there's actually a better thing I can do, which is go ahead and call for some reinforcements. Whenever you muster for reinforcements, you get to pick from 4 options. Which is... You may pick 2 regular units, a regular unit and a leader, an elite unit. I guess there's only 3 options. Yeah. And we really would rather have 1 regular and 1 leader. So I'm going to recruit an Isengard regular in Orthanc. And I'm going to recruit a Nazgul in Moranon. And now the dice are done, and we're going to move to round 3. This will be the last actual round of this video. But don't worry, we're going to be sticking with this game for a while. So, everyone gets their dice back. Why have I not brought in the Witch King yet? Oh, because there's none of the free peoples are at war just yet. Makes sense. The dice are back. We each get a card. There's a very strong and important, whatchamajigger. There's a very strong motive for the free people's player to play at least 2 cards this turn. Otherwise, they're going to have to discard. And then the shadow player gets 1 of each. Boop and boop. Do the free people want to move? Does the fellowship want to move? So here's kind of the long-range planning this game involves. If I want to get Aragorn the White, or Aragorn Arrow of Isildur, into the game as soon as possible, I want to start moving south rather than east. Because that'll give Aragorn an easier path to Gondor if I decide I want to move. But moving 1 region really just isn't worth it. I'd like to get at least to 3 or 4 before I start moving. So I think I'm just going to wait on this decision for right now. Yeah, so I'm not going to declare the fellowship. The elves are already activated. So I don't have to allocate any dice to the hunt box, and I'm not gonna. So we're gonna roll Free Peoples. That's Rule of the West could be very important. I'm just gonna re-roll that die because it was kind of sitting on its side. Okay. One die goes into the hunt box. And the free people are going to start by using their character die, and they're going to advance the fellowship. Again, one die rolled by the shadow. If it's a 6, it succeeds. If it's not, it doesn't. It doesn't succeed. This goes into the box, meaning subsequent moves will be more dangerous. Fine. Do we get any cool cards? You're not at war. Oh, that's a very powerful card. I like that. But I don't really feel rushed yet. This would actually be a good time to play the Lidless Eye. Because I know they're probably going to want to try to move once more this turn by using their Will of the West result. But whatever. Alright. I only have 2 army dice. I definitely want to get prepared for another attack. Let me count something here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I can't combine these 2 armies, which is what I was checking. I think I'm going to play another army die. And I'm going to get this army moved. I'm going to take this army off the map and use the army tokens. And this is just because otherwise there's like lots of things on the board all the time. This just reduces the numbers a bit. And I'm going to place this tile here in Minas Morgul. That was one army that I've moved. I don't want to move too aggressively here yet. Not until I see what the North is planning to do here. So instead, I think I'm going to take these 3 regulars and push them down to the Gap of Rohan. Game. Thank you. Done. Free People's player. What kinds of events do they have that they might wish to play? Oh. Oh, dang. And there is a Free People's Army in Osgiliath. Yeah, let's do it. Let's play Faramir's Raiders. What good timing. So I'm going to use Palantir to do that. So I roll 3 dice, and there's a hit against the army for each result of 5 or 6. I got 2 hits. Now, the Shadow player chooses how they are allocated. I'm going to say they're going to attack South Athelion. So they lose 2 regulars. That definitely blunts the attack, though, which is a very good news for them. But even better, they get to recruit for free. And normally, remember, they can't recruit at all. But yeah, there's a People's Army in Osgiliath, so they get 1 Gondor unit and a leader. So we're going to give them an elite, and we're going to give them a leader. Osgiliath will not be an easy fight. For sure. Notice I don't get to draw another card because he's Gandalf the White, not Gandalf the Gray. But that's fine. And that concludes the Free People player's turn. How big is the army of Minos Morgul? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I can only add one more unit. So there's a hard limit of stacking 10 units. You can only have 10 units in a space. So I'm going to play another army die. I've only got one more, so I might as well use it while I've got it. And we're going to shift all these guys down here. So we're going to basically make a second South Ithilien army. And then we're going to shift the second army from Minos Morgul into North Ithilien. All right. The Free People's player has an important choice to make, which is what are they going to do with this Will of the West result? But then I decided right now. Is there another good event to play? Probably File of Galadriel, in all honesty, would be very, very helpful. So we're going to go and play File of Galadriel. And this is going to add a special tile to the hunt pool once Fellowship gets to Mordor. That actually heals corruption. So we're going to put that over there. That concludes their turn. Now the Shadow player is going to move. So there's really three options here that I can take that would be very beneficial. Option 1, attack the Fords of Isen. In order to begin a move on Helm's Deep in a later turn. Option 2, attack Osgiliath with one of these two armies. Option 3, commit this army to attacking the Elven Stronghold and just worry about when the North gets in the war, when it gets in the war. Those are really my three choices here. And the numbers are much more in my favor to fight at the Fords of Isen. So we're actually going to go there first. So I'm going to play a character die. And we're going to attack the Fords of Isen. So I declare all my armies in Orthanc attack the Fords of Isen. This is a fortification, which is going to matter. So here are the phases of a battle. They can't retreat into siege because there's no stronghold there. So first, the attacker gets to play an event, and they're going to use the bottom half now. And I really like Deadly Strife. Or from Foul Stench. We're going to play Foul Stench. So what this basically means is the Free Peoples are not going to get to reroll. Oh no, wait. I can't play that card because I don't have a Nazgul. Just kidding. I mean, I could play that card, it would be stupid. I'm going to play Deadly Strife, which means both armies add +2 to all their rolls. Meaning there's a much higher likelihood that there's going to be casualties. Which benefits the Shadow, because anything that the Free People lose is gone forever. The Free People could also play a combat card. I can't play that one. Ooh. But there's no elites there, so I can't play that card either. I'm going to play Confusion. So this means before the modifications result, if there's a 1, 1s are always misses, 6 are always hits, regardless of how the modifications work. They'll actually hurt themselves. So that's going to be an interesting fight. Now we count up the combat strength. Elites and regulars are worth 1 strength. You can have a maximum of 5 in any battle. I've got way more than 5 here in Isengard, and they've only got 2 units. So I'm going to roll 5 dice, and they're going to roll 2. So I'm just going to roll all the dice at the same time, because why not? Normally you'd hit on a 5 or a 6. However, because this is a stronghold, that means, or a fortification rather, that means the first round only, it takes at least a 6 for the attacker to get a hit. So note that they did roll a 1, so that automatically scores a hit against the Shadow Army. So I have to keep that in mind. That counts as a hit against them. But because of the +2, I actually get 4 hits, which is actually more than enough to wipe out their army. But they do get a hit. So basically, I'm going to take 2 losses, but they lose everything. So, dead, dead, dead. I take 2 losses. I could reduce an elite to a regular. But I'm just going to lose 2 regulars. And they just go back into the reinforcement pool. They could be brought in later. And just like that, the Fords of Isen, up, not Saruman. You stay where you were. You can't move. And in case you're wondering, how was I able to make an attack with a character die? It's because of Saruman, who says that elites count as leaders. And I do have multiple elites here. That's why it counts. Now, Helm's Deep is in real trouble, because there's only actually 1 unit here. That's going to be... This is now an immediate cause for alarm for the Fellowship. The question is, can the Fellowship do anything about it? And unfortunately, the answer to this is actually no. Because there is no army nearby that could march to their defense. I mean, there is one option, right? Which is abandon Osgiliath to go save Helm's Deep. It's not the best strategy, though. It's not the best strategy. We may just have to accept that Helm's Deep is going to fall. Unless I can get the elves involved, but even then, that's probably just going to trigger an attack by the Shadow player on Lorien. Alright, this is boring, but it has to be done. And I know it's going to trigger them to bring out the Witch King. Oh, most importantly. So first of all, because I attacked Rohan, they flip to activated. And let me see how many boxes they move. I think they move 2. So I initiated a battle. Oh, interesting. On an event card that could affect... Interesting, okay. So a city that's not a city or town, it's just a fortification. So that does move Gondor once because we attacked them. Or Rohan once. Alright. Bringing the elves into the war is probably something that has to happen sooner rather than later. So I can start building up the elves. If nothing else, I can start building them up to resist this attack by the Shadow player. So I think, as boring as it is, I'm just going to go ahead and put the elves at war. Immediately, it's a muster die, right? Yep. Muster die, we bring in the Witch King. any shadow army that has at least one shadow unit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We're going to put the Witch King in army number 1. He counts as a Nazgul, so he can move infinite spaces with a character die, which is pretty spicy. And I get to draw a card during the first battle after I attack them. So that's pretty good. That's it for me for that turn, for the Shadow player. How are they going to use the Will of the West result? I gotta tell you, mustering for the Elves sounds like an awfully smart strategy, but they're still 2 dice away from attacking me as the Elves. Oh, most important thing happened too, though. Every Free People's Nation is now activated because of the Witch King. So I'm wondering if getting the North closer to the war is more valuable, because then they could theoretically threaten Dol Guldur. And we can gather up these guys and go after Angmar. Or the Elves, now being at war, could start moving this way. There's a lot of things that can happen. Or we have this wonderful card, Kurdan's Ships, which give me 2 elite, 2 units in a coastal region. I could put them in the Grey Havens. And I think that would actually be quite helpful. So we're going to turn this into a Palantir. And then we're going to play it to play this card, Kurdan's Shipwrights. And I'm going to put 2 elites in the Grey Havens. Now, as a Shadow player, I still have 3 more cards I can play. Or 3 more events, or 3 more things to do. I'm going to go ahead and play Give It To Us, which adds a special tile to the hunt pool. This is important because it also stops their movement. And that is the Palantir symbol. I could draw another card, but I don't really see a point. Got 2 character dice. What do I like to do with these character dice? Probably make 2 more attacks. So I'm going to go ahead and use 1 character die. And we're going to attack Helm's Deep. Now, before the battle even starts, they have an option. They can retreat into Helm's Deep, which would make this a siege. Or they can retreat to another province. No, wait, no, they can't. Because it's either retreat and do a siege if they want to. Yeah, I think they're just going to retreat into the siege for right now. And Helm's Deep. So that's it. This is now a besieged stronghold. You can no longer use it to muster reinforcements. However, this is going to put Rohan at war. Because I did... No, I actually haven't captured anything. Yeah, it's per battle. I did initiate the battle, so that is going to push Rohan 1 step closer to war. I'm going to go ahead and start a siege battle here. And this is very bad news for the Free People's player, because they only got 1 unit. So, a siege works a lot like every other battle. However, if the battle is to go on more than 1 round, I have to reduce an elite unit. And it's always, I only hit on a 6 if I'm attacking a stronghold. But I feel pretty confident that we're going to be able to do that without too much of a hassle. I do get to pick a combat event. The Witch King is not in this battle, sadly, so I don't get to use his superpower. But it doesn't have to be there. They don't have a companion. I'm going to play Deadly... No. That's too good. Return to Valinor is too damn good. I'm actually not going to play a combat card. And I can't legally play either of these because neither of those things are true. So, I have 5 combat strength. They have 1. I only hit on 6s. As long as I get 1 6 at some point, I win. And Helm's Deep belongs to the Shadow. I did not get any 6s. And there's no modifiers either. He didn't hit me either. So basically I have to decide, do I reduce an elite to continue the battle? And the answer is, you're damn right I do. So the battle continues. I still have 5 combat strength. He still only has 1. Oh, I didn't reroll for my leaders, did I? Hang on. That's a very big deal. So I have 3 leaders, because remember, elites count as both, thanks to Saruman. I get to reroll 3 of my failures. I can't reroll a 1. A 1's always a miss. If any of these is a 6, I win the battle. I still failed. Okay. So I'm going to continue to the siege. I'm going to reduce this elite to a regular. And both sides choose no combat cards, and we're just going to roll again. I did more than enough damage. He is going to take out one of my regulars on the way. But that gentleman of Rohan is dead. Rohan's in the war now, but they've also just lost Helm's Deep. So what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these settlement control markers, we're going to flip it to the shadow side, and we're going to put it here. And this is an important reminder, because it reminds the Free People's player, I can't raise reinforcements here. And, even more importantly, I gain 2 victory points as the shadow player. Helm's Deep has fallen, and we're going to begin round 4 next episode. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you're enjoying the series. This is still very much anybody's game, but Rohan could get wiped from the table quite quickly, and they're going to have to find a way to deal with that. But until next time, this has been Indian. Thank you for watching, and I bid you good day.